Welcome to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Southwest Washington's #1 show for real estate news and information. Without further ado, here are your hosts and a couple of guys who, as busy realtors and successful brokerage owners, know a thing or two about real estate. Steve Nassar of Premier Property Group and Joe Festolo of Soldera Properties.
Hey, welcome.
Welcome. Good to be back.
It's great to be back. We have a lot to talk about this podcast for the best of masters. And, what's interesting is 6 months leading up to mid-August, all we talked about was buyer rep, NAR changes, commissions, different MLSs. And now it's tried and tested. We've had 3 months to do this, and the sky isn't falling. And I think it would be great to jump in and hit these big topics kind of one at a time and talk through them completely, rather than go to each and every individual thread. I think we can kind of lump them all together and talk about these changes. What do you think?
I love it. Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Can you believe it's only been 3 months? Why does it feel like it's been much longer than that since these changes happened? But you're spot on. I mean, it was August 17th, and here we are. It's November 20th today, so it's exactly 3 months. But yeah,
but it's been about a year. It's been over a year since last October 2023 when
it was Halloween Day. By the way, it was Halloween Day. I remember it was Halloween Day that the lawsuit, the jury came out and said guilty. Yeah. So remember, I was getting ready for some Halloween activities. Yeah. So 11 months. We've been talking about it, stressing about it, panicking about it, bitching about it. But it's been a very smooth 3 months, at least for me. And, all of the brokers that embrace it and want to learn as much as possible, and they're moving forward, educated in an educated manner. It's not a bad thing. It's just different. And there's a lot of benefits that come with it. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. We've got a lot to talk about there because I think people will be surprised with my observations.
Well, let's hear them. Let's dig in. What do you want to tackle first? Should we start with the NAR changes and implementations and how that changes our narrative with our clients and customers?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just start with commissions. Let's just talk commissions. I mean, look, the CEO of Compass was on an interview, and it was pushed out by some, maybe it was Inman or Housing Wire or something. He was on an interview, and he said he doesn't feel like commissions have come down since the change. I'm actually going to disagree with him. I think they've gone up since the change, which I think is not something we would have ever expected to be the case 6 months ago or a year ago. But I'm seeing it, and I'm not just seeing it for myself. I'm looking at offers coming in on my listings consistently asking for more than the BAC would have been in the old world.
Yeah.
And I know what I'm getting from my sellers. I'm going to be, obviously, as we're always are, Joe, I'm going to be careful not to say numbers or commissions, but
sure.
And I know what I'm charging my sellers, and I'm adding those together, and it's categorically more than those sellers would have paid 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago. Okay. In most cases, obviously there's some variance here. I'm also seeing what I'm going and getting on my buyers that we're working with, and it's more than the BAC I would have been paid for 6 months or a year ago. There have been a couple of exceptions where, but not much, and not. I'm trying to think of a listing, and we've sold a lot of listings. I know it's only been 90 days, but we're rocking and rolling, and we'll talk about the market and the state of the market here in a little bit as well, Joe. But we're having our best November ever, and I think we're going to have our best December ever. So something's good's going out there for us, at least right now. And I don't think I'm alone. Armalist data showed that year over year pending sales are up 25%, which is a big number. But so there's been quite a few listings over the last 90 days that have popped, and we're seeing what the buyers are asking for in their offers. I don't think I remember one out of probably 20, 30 listings where they asked for less than a standard BAC that we would have had, and I won't use the word standard, but what we would have deemed standard, our team, what we generally would have done 6 months or a year ago. So I don't feel like buyer side commissions are down. I think they're up. And I know my listing side commissions are up. So yeah, not only has the sky not fallen on commissions, but I think positive things are happening. Here's a couple reasons why. I've had this conversation with a few other people, offline. This is how I would best explain it. There's a couple things going on with why this has been a positive, at least in this environment, in this market that we're in. And that is a wild card. And I think you would agree with me, Joe. If we get into another COVID type bananas market in the future, it could be different. There could be serious downside pressures on buyer side commissions and maybe even seller commissions. But in this environment that we are in now, and thank goodness this change happened when we're in this environment and not some red hot market, because that would have been really, hard to adjust. But we've decoupled commissions. That was very clearly what was happening. Okay. Let me ask you a question, Joe. This is the analogy I would use. If your doctor comes to you and says, Joe, you're sick, I got to give you a pill. And let's just say the pill's, the size of a gobstopper or some kind of jawbreaker. Sure. Is that easier to take? Or if he takes that same pill and slices it in two, goes, here, take half now and take half again in a day, which is easier? That's kind of what we're doing with
the smaller one is far easier to digest. And I like your analogy, because now we're talking to clients about half of a commission instead of the full boat. Yep. And whenever there's chaos, there's disruption. Wherever there's disruption, traditionally commissions shrink a little bit. And that's happened forever. When I started in this business, the commissions were substantially higher. And then every disruption, every so many years, it goes down a quarter a point or so, which seems to be competitive as far as a competitive basis. And now we're only talking about half a commission, and each and every broker has their own formula of what your commission is. For example, the things I consider: how expensive is the house? How expensive is the marketing campaign? Is there a referral fee folded into it? How far away is it? How long will it take to sell? Are they repeat customers? Are they veterans, police, firemen, first responders, doctors, retired, or widows? All of those things kind of go into what a commission is. I try and do right by everybody, but you holistically have to look at it. Like people licensed in Oregon, it's good for the entire state of Oregon. People licensed in Washington, you're licensed in the entire state of Washington. Would I go to Roseburg to take a $300,000 listing? No. Would I go to Roseburg to sell a $3 million listing? Probably worth the drive time. And, after you figure out price, it's all marketing at that point. So everybody has to formulate their own commissions. But when you talk to the seller, and in the old days, it's like, well, the commission is this, and half of it or a percentage of it goes to the other guy. Now they're looking at this big number instead of just what your commission is. But the byproduct of that is we still need to have those intense conversations with the sellers that is most likely an offer is most likely coming in from another broker who will have a buyer rep agreement with that buyer that the buyer is going to want you to pay. And so be ready for it. And I think too few people are having that conversation. They just get the listing, they're happy to have it, and then an offer comes, and then the sellers are like, what's this compensation demand that they're sending over? And that conversation should have happened at the very, very beginning. But I don't see commissions going down for the first time in my career. I see it maintaining the same, maybe even a little bit better.
And that's such a good point, Joe, and I was reading about this recently somewhere as well. It was talking about buyer side commissions have been trending down for decades, right? So that's not new. So the premise that this was going to do more of that, actually, even if it had done that, that in of itself wouldn't have been a change. If this did bring buyer commissions down a little bit, that was the direction they were trending in already. What's interesting and cool about this is it gives us the control. It, for the first time, and I mean on the buyer side, for the first time ever, that trend downwards, we get to take control of that and go, no, you're not going down. I know my value. I'm going to my buyers. This is what I'm worth. And if it doesn't work for them, it doesn't work for them. And that's okay. We move on. And that has happened to me. And that has not been a bad thing. We're deciding early on that it doesn't work. I'll give you a quick story. So about a month and a half ago, one of my agents did an open house, and they encountered a great prospective buyer there, and they did a great job. They said, me and Steve would love to work with you. I'm on Steve Nassar's team. Can I set up a meeting with him? And they said, sure. We ended up doing a conference call. It ended up just being a phone conference call, and it ended up lasting about 45 minutes. It was a phone interview. It was a couple days after that open house, and I thought it went really well, and it did. We talked about the area they're looking at. We talked about what we bring to the table. We talked about the value we offer. We talked about our experience. We talked about our knowledge of working with a lot of listings as well as buyers, and being able to reverse engineer the experience from the other side, understanding what sellers are looking for when we craft the offer, et cetera, et cetera. Went very, very well. They said thank you, left. They were interviewing with a couple other agents, and they'd be back in touch. And it was about, I said, when should I follow up with you? They said, a week. Ended up about 5 days later, I got an email, and they thanked us for our time. They said, we really liked you guys, but we are going with somebody that we just feel is a better fit for the area we're looking at. And we moved on.
Sure.
Joe, in the old days, that could have been 90, 120 days of showings. That I spent 45 minutes on the phone. My agent spent, maybe half hour, 45 minutes in the open house.
Sure.
And that's it. That's it. Now, while we would have loved to have had the business, that was our exposure at this point. It was a minimal amount of time. In the old days, how many agents that we know, yourself, myself included, and everybody listening to us, how many of us, we've all done it, where we work with somebody for weeks and weeks and months, and then they make a change. If we're, some were using contracts more than others, and but everyone's worked with someone where it wasn't a contract. I'll call to the carpet anyone that says every buyer I've ever worked with always had a contract, right? So how nice to be able to control our value and be able to say, and of course, on that interview, I said, this is what we charge. And this is the two things that come into play is how much we're going to charge the buyer percentage wise, and how long the contract was going to be for. And I told them there's some flexibility on the terms of the contract. If you want to, if you want to test drive us a little bit, with a shorter term contract for a little while, and then we can do an extended one. I was open to that, that scenario. But so that's what's cool is we control the value, and we also know upfront if it's going to work or not, and we can move forward accordingly, either with them in an agreement contract or without. So to my point, commissions had been already shrinking. It almost feels to me on the buyer side, this has kind of neutralized that. This has kind of stopped it and maybe even elevated a little bit, to your point. Any thoughts on that, Joe?
Oh my God. I have things running through my mind. I got to write it down or I'll forget. There's something that I'd like to make a point to let all of our listeners and subscribers know, that although when you get a listing, you're really talking about half of a commission, but you need to let them know the process and what to expect.
Absolutely.
Most likely a buyer's coming from another broker. They have a buyer rep agreement with that buyer. That buyer is going to want the seller to pay that for them. And the second part is, aside from having your sellers walk forward eyes wide open, be an advocate for your fellow realtors.
I love that, Joe.
When
Thank
you
you.
go and you take a listing, you're talking half of a percentage, but don't squish the BAC to something lower than what's competitive. Tell them, hey, look, they're going to come in and it's going to be somewhere in this range, and be prepared to pay that.
And if you don't, they're going to have to dig into their bank account and pull that out to pay their agent anyway. So it all comes out in the wash. So
exactly.
And what I mean by that, Joe, is if you don't pay their agent what their agent is asking, they're going to take that off the price. They're going all the numbers come down to the bottom line. So if they have to pull into their bank account to pay that money or a portion of that money, then that's less that they can pay for your house. So don't get confused by the algebra, and just acknowledge, okay, they have a contract for this amount. Let's respect that. And let's understand that they have to pay that amount. And let's just figure it out in the price of the house.
Well, exactly right. And, it's funny. There are reasons why sellers want you to reduce your commission. And it just happens to be every single reason out there, right? Hey, 07 to 2012. Hey, we bought it for X. We have to sell it for this. We're taking a bad haircut. We want everyone to get a bad haircut to minimize our loss. But flip it around. The market's crazy. You've gotten these guys tons of equity, and it's like, well, the value of houses have doubled, but your commission amount has stayed the same. So I want you to reduce your commission. Whatever the scenario it is, it's kind of like, hey, I want you to reduce your commission because of this reason. I'm in a bad shape, so you need to not charge as much. Hey, the homes are expensive and your commission stayed the same. You're making twice as much money. You need to adjust that. The mantra is you need to adjust your commissions. I don't hear that anymore when I talk about one commission, just the listing side. And I think the other thing that's relative is if you sell someone a house for $500,000 and the market tanks and it's only worth $300,000, we don't share in that loss, right? We don't share in that loss. Kind of like a stockbroker. You buy stock, it tanks, they sell it. You don't share in that loss. Well, you sell them a house for $500,000. 2021 comes, we're fast and furious. Now, with multiple offers and all that other stuff, and in the end of 2022, maybe it's worth $850,000. We don't share in that $350,000 appreciation. We are the means and the tools used to sell it. But sellers and buyers kind of get mixed up, and they want us to be part of that negotiation, and that shouldn't happen. So if I could instill one point to everybody on this podcast, is be an advocate, not only for yourself, but for the fellow realtor. When that commission demand comes in and it's reasonable, it's not artificially too high, but it's
Absolutely.
Reasonable.
Good point.
Protect that person's commission and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is what they want. They want X. And, maybe it's a quarter point higher than what you were expecting. And look, if it isn't palatable to you, honor that commission and raise your price equivalently.
Even if it means going slightly over asking price. If it means going slightly over asking price. Yeah. And such a good point. I'm glad you're touching on this, Joe. I think it's very important for our listeners to hear. I think it's good. It's good for our industry. It's good for the sellers, and it's good for the buyers. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why it's good for the buyers that maybe others aren't thinking of. It allows them to finance that commission. It allows them to put it in the mortgage. When you have to reach into your bank and pull that cash out, look, if they want to do that, they would have written it up that way already. If they want to reach in their bank and pay it, they'll put that in their offer. They'll say 0 commission. Okay.
Sure.
But if they're putting it in the offer that they want a set commission, there's a reason for it. You have to assume there's a reason for it. It's because they would prefer to spread that commission out over 30 years and finance it versus having to and save the money in the bank so that they can change your carpets, paint the house, or do whatever else. Have a nest egg to reserves. This is not that different than when we were doing VA loans before. We've done it for years and years, right? You have a $500,000 house. The buyer needs $10,000 for closing costs. So they offer you $500,000 with $10,000 for closing costs so they can do their VA loan. If you countered back, let's just say your seller, it's new on the market and the seller feels, nope, it's worth $500,000. I'm not giving you those $10,000. Then go 510, counter back 510, giving them the $10,000. Okay. What have you done? You've allowed them to put that into their loan so they don't have to pull $10,000 out of the bank, which they may or may not have. And now it's spread out over the life of the loan. Okay. We are doing the same thing now with commissions. Just build it into the price of the house at whatever they're asking for, as long as it's reasonable. Thank you for saying that, Joe.
Absolutely. And what I'd like to do is, as an advocate for ourselves and other realtors, is let's have that conversation up front. When it comes in, let's protect those reasonable competitive commissions and then say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, now you counter the buyer. What I don't want is everything to be open-ended and have the seller say, well, we'll take this offer, but that guy's commission has to go down a percentage point. I don't want this four-way variable. Let's protect the commissions and then have buyer and seller haggle it out on price. The one thing that has teeth is you have a buyer rep agreement. And so if the seller says, I don't want to pay that, then the buyer needs to think, gosh, well, I have a contract with this broker. So if we can't get the seller to pay him, I'm going to have to pay them. And guess what? The price just changed. And the price is going to change probably significantly more than the percentage. If the percentage equaled $10,000, the offer might change by $15,000 or $20,000. The other thing is, back in the day, you see those little cartoon comics and it's like, hey, here's a realtor on vacation and there's a guy on a beach and he's on his cell phone and he has his computer out and he's in a lounge chair on the beach, but he's working the whole time. Look at the freedom. Our buyers can go and they can blow up all the open houses every Saturday, every Sunday. Look until you're cross-eyed. I don't care. I have a contract with them. It's the first time in real estate history that we're actually treating our business as a business. I never, ever liked the way it used to work. You could have people after hours, Saturday, Sunday, always the worst time. They live 15 miles away from you and they want to see a house a block away from them Saturday at 5 p.m. And then you have to drive out there, show the house, and then drive back. This can go on every weekend for 4 months, and then they can end up buying through a builder that doesn't cooperate, or they can buy it for sale by owner, or they can go to a open house where the listing agent says, well, hey, if you buy it through me, you probably get a better deal and you'll probably get the house. We don't have to worry about that. And now that we're here, I'm thinking about it.
It just gives you peace. It just gives you peace of mind. Your business has a moat around it, right? Every one of your clients, if they're either your client or they're not. It was always that way with listings. It's finally that way with buyers. I have somebody that reached out to me. They found me online through some various sources. It's a great buyer. They're up in Washington. They're looking at $2 million houses. They've signed a buyer agreement. We did a phone interview and we've bounced some emails and set them up on a search, put them in our system. I'm meeting them Thursday at 1:00. I'm personally going along with a team member, and I'm going to show them 6 great, fabulous $2 million houses up in all over Southwest Washington. I'm thrilled to do that. I feel so secure. It's almost like you're married. I mean, it's like there's security in your relationship. It allows you to give to them and treat them the way they deserve to be treated. And you feel good about doing that because you have a contract. You're going to get paid.
Absolutely. And there's another benefit.
Or there's a higher likelihood you're going to get paid. Obviously, they can still not buy, but
if the buyer doesn't want to sign a buyer rep agreement, it usually means you haven't explained it well enough to them. I haven't had any trouble getting them signed. Matter of fact, Cheryl Clunes, who is with us, but she was at a different company. She and I did a buyer rep agreement, I think it's 9 years ago, at Eastmoreland Golf Club. We had 450 people in the room, and everyone was looking at us like we were crazy. Why would any buyer sign that when they can go to any realtor and have them show them houses and they don't have to sign anything? And my answer is, you got to treat your business like a business. And those who, when it wasn't mandatory, those who didn't do buyer rep agreements, quite honestly, haven't been in the business enough to have been screwed enough times that they realize their time is valuable, their work time with their definitive clients, their friends, their family, their free time, off hours, weekends. That's all important. And you could beat your head against the wall and they were free to go somewhere else. There are actually buyers that would work with a realtor who is available to just show them everything. And usually it's like, ooh, this one popped up. I want to see it. The next day, this one popped up. I want to see it. But their whole intention is to buy it through the listing agent because they want to save a portion of what the BAC is because they don't have a realtor. All of that funny stuff was going on and it has stopped now. So if a buyer doesn't sign a buyer rep agreement, it means 2 things. It means I haven't done my job explaining it well enough to them, or I explained it to them and it's not a fit for me. And there is some backing because I know a lot of people have trouble presenting buyer rep agreements. Well, if anything, I mean, first of all, you have to sell yourself to the buyer now, not just the seller. You have to have a good presentation, show them all the benefits, all the things you're going to be doing, looking online, offline, coming soon, all this other stuff. And there's a huge benefit for it, but the fallback is if you show a property without a buyer rep agreement and you are audited, there's a fine up to $5,000. So if anything, I wouldn't lead with that. But after you do your presentation and say, hey, look, I'd really love to show you this house. I'd really love to work with you. And I think I've expressed all the things I do to find you the perfect house and get you a good price and keep you protected and safe. But I'm not going to show you the house and risk myself getting fined $5,000. So if you want to see this house, unfortunately, I have to have a buyer rep or any realtor for that matter. Let's say it's not me, your cousin or whoever it is that you know in the real estate business. They have to have a buyer rep agreement. And do people show homes without one? I'm sure it happens. There's people that aren't meticulous and don't do things by the book all the time. What has 2 thumbs and doesn't show homes without a buyer rep agreement? This guy. And for those of you listening and not watching, I am pointing both thumbs at me because a $5,000 fine is not worth it for me. I'll roll up my sleeves and explain what their fears are. And it might take another half hour and we get it signed or we don't. But I know after that half hour, I'm working and walking forward and working with these people with purpose, or we cut bait and they have to read on the internet and listen to the public and determine their own conclusion. But I'm ethical. I keep my nose clean. I do it by the book. And I tell you what, when they find someone that showed a house without a buyer rep agreement and they get audited and they can't produce one, and they get their $5,000 fine and maybe a suspension, I guarantee you the whole world is going to make that person the poster child for this guy didn't do it. Now he's fined $5,000 and he has legal costs and everything else. You don't want that to be you, do you? And I think that will level up everyone's game if they're still wishy-washy about it.
Yep. No, good stuff. Good stuff. The only other note I had here that I was going to mention when we were talking about the decoupling of commissions and commissions being up in my experience since this change is that there's also this, in the old days, we would go to our seller and we'd go, okay, here, we're going to do a listing contract. Here's your commission. It's one big commission, right? And we had to make them swallow that big pill up front. There was always this mentality. They did not yet know how the market was going to respond to their house. And this is where the current market we're in is an advantage in this regards, for sure. So in their minds, they're like, well, okay, I'm giving the buyer's agent X in their mind, because you've told them, right? And they're like, okay, well, okay, that whatever. Okay, what it seems like a lot, but whatever. Now they don't have to pick that number and agree to it until after they've been on the market. Well, guess what happens, Joe, when you list that house and a week goes by and another week goes by? They are thrilled to pay that buyer's agent because they start going, oh, I'm not the belle of the ball. Yeah. My house isn't catching fire in a good way and getting 4 offers. Gosh, did I overprice my house? Do we need to drop the price? When they finally do get that offer, there is this tendency they're much more agreeable to the other portion of the commission now that they have to agree to. So it's not just that we're decoupling the commissions and I'm going to go back to my analogy. If the doctor takes a big pill and cuts it in half, in this analogy, you take the half today. Well, if you're sicker tomorrow, bear with me on this analogy, you're thrilled to take that second pill the next day, right? Because you're like, oh, I'm even feeling worse today. Let me take the next one. Maybe it'll help. Once we get their house on the market, oftentimes they're not selling as fast as they thought it could. So when that second ask for commissions that comes in, they're much more agreeable to pay it because they're thrilled to have an offer. They've been on the market oftentimes a little bit. So the decoupling of commissions, in my book, has been a very good thing for our business. I think I have no complaints about it.
There's another aspect to look at, and I keep going back to being an advocate for yourself and other realtors. Let's just look from the listing side of things. We can't really get into the weeds with commission, but I could tell you, I got my license in 1991. There were really kind of 2 commissions that people had. You had, back then, statistically speaking, I ran it through title companies. It was somewhere between 6 and 7. It was 6%, 6.25%, 6.5%, 6.75%, or 7. And there were 2 things going on that I think a lot of people didn't know about. Let's say back in 91, someone gets a commission, let's say 7%, okay, which is not unheard of 30 some odd years ago. Well, there was sort of an unwritten rule that the listing agent gets 55%. And the selling agent gets 45%. So if it's a 7% commission, the listing agent gets 3.85. The selling agent gets 3.15. Let's take another example. If it's 6%, then the selling agent gets 2.7 and the listing agent gets 3.3. That's 55-45. But it wasn't written down that it had to be 55-45. So there were people charging 7%, paying out 2.75 or 2.5. They were keeping 70% of the commission and paying out 30%. And I don't think that's right. Let's flip it around a little bit. There's brokers out there that are volume brokers. I want to list prices at any price, and I'm going to have a low commission, and I'm going to get lots of listings. Well, it's not the way I like to do it, but there's a benefit. If you have 5 signs in a neighborhood, guess who's getting a call from that neighborhood when they're thinking of selling? You have free advertising on everybody's yard. They drive by and all they do is see your sign and pull your flyers. And then you go on a listing appointment and, gee, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, look at, I have 30 active listings right now. And you show them this big sheet and little squares of a picture of the house and the whole back page of the newspaper. There's benefits for it, but they switch to the commission, but they share the pain with the selling broker and they squish their commission as well. So they're cutting commission and getting these listings. Instead of those other 2 people they interviewed, they go with the cheapest commission guy, and he's taken a big chunk, or she, out of the selling agent, which isn't good for you. I remember having, many years ago, $1 million house was an expensive house. It's not really anymore, but it was an expensive house. And you go to they say, hey, there's 3 houses we like. And we pull up the 3 houses and we go, okay, 2.75. This one's 3. This one's 2.5. We'd go straight to the BAC. And it was always a bad day when there was a really good looking house and it was at a terrific price and they had a lower than competitive BAC. If these buyers wanted the house and wanted you to write up an offer, there's nothing you could do about it because that person is making more money by taking it out of you by not offering something competitive. And it was always a bad day when, sure enough, you look at a dozen houses at normal competitive compensation, and then one comes on that seems to be shot down from heaven, and it's the one they love, and it's priced right, and it's beautiful, and it's a horrible BAC. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't blackball it. That's against antitrust laws. You can't blackball it. You can choose not to write the offer, or you can choose to write it. But now we have a contract where, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I have a contract with you for X. And that is our negotiating power because it's like, hey, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you don't have to pay my commission because I have a contract with my buyers. But if my buyers are paying my commission, you can knock 50 grand off your price. I don't care how I get paid. I have a contract to get paid. If you want these buyers to stick for your house, maybe pay my compensation, and then you guys start negotiating price versus taking a hard line. It's infinitely easier for a seller to pay commission than a buyer. A buyer has, if they put down 20% and they have earnest money up front, and then they have a host of inspections, they got to pay the lender, let's say a 1% loan origination fee. They have to pay their half of the Alta for title fees. And then, oh yeah, I also have to carve out 25 grand for my broker because the sellers wouldn't pay for it. They're not positioned that way. You can finance it now, but it's still kind of old school, even though it's decoupled. If a seller wants to sell their house and they're not banking on one realtor to bring the buyer to them, who is their listing agent, they're going to have to compensate someone because nobody works for free, including the listing agent. If someone comes to me and they say, hey, I'm not represented, I want to buy it through you, I will do it. I will not represent the buyer because I believe you should only have one representation at a time, and it should be your oldest representation. My first representation was with the seller. I can write you this offer for you. I can coach you. I can show you the timelines. I can recommend all my people I use and inspectors. I just can't specifically tell you what to offer. And I can't tell you what I think the seller would take. But we can put this all together. But guess what? There's only one realtor involved, but you still have a selling realtor and a listing realtor. And it just so happens to be one person. And doing double the work for the same property, that shouldn't be looked at as free or savings to the seller or savings to the buyer. Maybe you could sweeten the deal a little bit, but unless that buyer comes and provides their own forms and does it all perfectly, just as if they were coming through a realtor, it doesn't make sense. In the old days, people would say, oh, yeah, I don't have a realtor, so I'll just buy it through you, but I want to save X amount of percentage off of the price, and the seller nets the same. Well, I don't net the same. I'm doing twice the work, providing all the forms for you, doing everything, and then you're getting the savings. I don't know. That just doesn't sound right to me. So at least we are protected if someone's stingy, and it's either going to be the seller or the realtor or both on the listing side. If it's less than lower compensation than what you're worth, we can actually do something about it. And we could rest peacefully on weekends knowing that there won't be any funny business, alleyway conversations between open house person and your buyers, right? You have them bound. So I've been trying to think of the drawbacks.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Joe, I can't.
I'm with you. I'm loving the second half of this year. I really, truly am. And when I still see these people, and they're out there, trust me, moaning and groaning about NAR and RMLS and these commission changes. I'm like, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? I mean, I want to touch on one other thing here, Joe. I love this conversation. I think this is a really productive conversation, and I think we're really going into some good meat and potatoes on this topic here today. There's another component to this, and I have a story, an example of this that actually happened to me and one of my team members recently. And this is going back to sellers cutting buyers' agent commissions in their counteroffers. Okay. The cool thing about this new world we're in, where the commissions are decoupled and the seller doesn't have to decide or agree on the commission for the buyer's agent until the offer is made. The cool thing about this, and we've talked about this on this podcast, and we predicted this months and months ago before the change, is it allows the seller. And by the way, we're saying the seller is paying the commission, so they have the right to expect this because it's their money. It allows them to turn the buyer's agent into their advocate. Okay. In other words, the buyer's agent makes an offer on the house, and maybe it's lower than asking price. Oftentimes it is, and they're asking for a commission. Okay. The seller can say, hey, and this is part of my scripting and my conversation with my sellers, especially if they go, well, should we cut their commission? I say, well, how do you think that's going to go? If we want to get them up on price, let's say the house is 900 and they offered 850 and we want to get to 975 or 980, whatever. How do you think that's going to go if I say, hey, buyer's agent, thanks for your offer for X, but we're going to cut X down a little bit. Oh, and by the way, go get your buyers up to 982. Do you think that goes well? You're cutting their pay and asking them to work more and be your advocate? Let's leave their commission alone and then tell them to go up. And maybe instead of 980, maybe we take them up. Maybe we go to 985 or 989. And that way, you're getting what you were otherwise were thinking you wanted to cut out of their commission. And you're also keeping them your advocate because you're allowing them to make what they ask to make. And you're saying, hey, and obviously there needs to be a basis for your negotiations. I mean, if you are going to counter at 989, hopefully you're worth 980 or 889. Hopefully there's comps and data, and you haven't been on the market for a stale amount of time, and there's reasons to believe that is a reasonable amount for the house. I want to give you a story, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. This happened to me on the reverse side, but not in a good way. Okay, so we have some buyers that they were referred to me by a client. They're the son of the client. We were shopping in Happy Valley This was about 2 months ago. So it was after the commission changes. And we went on a tour of homes on a Saturday. I ended up going to a couple of the homes, and then my buyer's agent, my team member, showed them, 4 or 5 other homes. One of the first homes I saw with them, they liked. It was their favorite house. It ended up being their favorite house that entire day. The house, and I remember this quite specifically because this was quite a little scuttlebug on our team. I mean, we were pretty annoyed by all the way this played out, and we used it as a learning example of like, don't do this.
Sure.
The home had been on the market for 40 days. It had not had a price drop. I want to say the price was like $899, and it had been on the market for 40 days at $899 with no price drops. We made an offer asking for our commission to be paid by the seller at the amount that's in our contract. And I want to say we offered like $875. So we were 25 under asking price. And a lot of that was just based on time on the market. You've been on the market 40 days. No one else is making an offer on you. We thought that was a reasonable offer. The stupid freaking, and I don't know if it's the agent. I don't know if it's a seller. I don't know if it's a combination. They counter us. Get this, Joe. They counter us at full price. Okay.
Uh-huh.
But get this. They also cut our commissions. One thing, generally speaking, if you've been on the market for a while and you get an offer, and let's be clear, 40 days on the market, you're not a spring chicken anymore. I mean, you're seasoned on the market. The market has spoken a little bit, right? Yeah. Especially at that price. If you're talking a $3 million house, maybe I'll give you a little bit more grace. But at that price in Happy Valley, I mean, there's a lot of competition, and you've been on the market for a little while. Let's just start by saying if you counter full price anyways, that's kind of an FU counter. Would you agree with that? Like if something's been on the market for a while and you get a price and you like give them $1 off. Like I've even said that to sellers. I've had sellers over the years that want to counter full price. I'm like, that's a little bit of an FU counter. Yeah. How about we give them $1? How about we give them and by the way, $1 is not enough. How about $1,000? Give them $1,000. We were at $899. Let's give them $898, right? But it's even worse than that. Because they didn't just counter full price, they also countered our commission. So they really were like, hey, we're countering you over asking price after 40 days on the market. And this is where time on the market in your specific scenario matters, right? If this house had been listed the day before, I would have understood this, right?
Sure, yeah.
If it had 2 offers, I would have understood this, but that wasn't what was happening here. So long story short, we talked to our buyers. They said, let's pass. Let's keep looking. 3 days later, the stupid buyer's agent, and I'm sorry, I normally, I'm being a little bit dramatic here, but we did not have a good experience with this buyer's agent.
Seller's agent.
I'm sorry. Yes, we're the buyer's agents.
Yep.
Thank you, Joe. The listing agent, he ended up getting into it with my team member and accused her of not communicating well with her clients. And she goes, whoa. I'm communicating just fine with our clients. I'm not sure where you're getting that, and I don't appreciate it. So he was a jerk through the process. So I normally don't nitpick my other industry peers, but this one was worthy of a little bit of that. He comes back to us. He went back to her and goes, well, what do we do? What do we got to do to save the deal? And she said, well, you didn't even come $1 off your price and you cut our commissions. So now you're asking us to go to our buyers and get them up while you're cutting our pay. That doesn't feel good.
Did a price increase.
That doesn't feel good. And our clients didn't appreciate it. And so we're moving on. He goes around my team member, comes to me. He sends me a text, borderline complaining about my other team member who had done nothing wrong. And I just backed her up and I said, hey, this isn't going to work. You guys didn't come $1 off your price and you cut commissions. There's other houses out there. Our buyers are looking at it. And by the way, there's a happy ending to this story. They found another house. They like it much more.
Yeah.
Had very reasonable sellers.
Better, cheaper, more updated.
Everything. So there's a good what not to do in regards to this scenario. So Anyways, Joe, I know we got to move on. We've talked a lot about commissions. I think this is one of the cooler conversations we've had about that subject. And this was healthy because we're dissecting. This is no longer Steve and Joe, which we did for months and months with other members of our industry, by the way, oftentimes predicting what was going to happen. This is a it has happened. Let's dissect it. Let's talk about it. And so this has been really cool.
I got a couple of stories. I got a couple quick stories on topic. Yeah. On topic though. Look, I'm pretty transparent. If it's on my mind, I'll say it. And if it's snarky or sarcastic, I'll say it while smiling so it goes over better. But, I like humor and I like calling it what it is. And if we get a counter and it's a terrible counter, full price, not paying the commission, the buyer has to pay my commission and stuff. I have these conversations with the buyer. I'm like,
especially if it's unwarranted, right? Unwarranted. Like it's not the first day on the market. There's not 2 offers.
Yeah. It's like, look, this has been on the market for a month and a half. I don't know who the idiot is. And I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to have a conversation with the broker. And then I call the broker and I'm like, yeah, that's a awfully over the top counter. I was very disappointed in it shooting over to me. And I had a conversation with the buyers that they got to pay full price and my commission and everything else. So I just, forgive me, but I want to kind of find out who the dummy is. Are your sellers like very penny pinching? I'm not going to sell for out this price. And are they very strict, or are you advocating for this? I mean, let's first find the dummy on that side. And hey, it could be both of them. And I've had these conversations and sometimes they're like, yeah, Joe, he's an attorney and he thinks he knows more, and she watches HGTV all the time and they think they know more than everybody. And, this is what they feel it's worth. And it's a strong position. If you get pushback on it because you potentially called them a dummy, then they're going to like puff out their chest and say, well, I did the comps, it's worth everything.
And where's your offers, buddy? Where's your offers?
Ding, ding. Okay.
Yeah.
So identify the dummies, 1 or 2. And look, they're incentivizing you to not move forward. It's like, you sell a rental for a client and the tenant's there. Well, the tenant has a vested interest in it not selling. Everybody that comes through, it's like, yeah, the trash compactor doesn't work, never worked, and there's no disposal, and it drips under the sink, and they're like telling all the horrible stuff. Because if it sells, they got to go relocate, or they got to figure something out. And so to counter back at full price and not pay the other commission, and in this scenario, the buyer would be paying our commission, they're like, next, let's move on, go somewhere else. So I'm a big fan of being an advocate for realtors, and then let buyer and seller haggle out price. I just don't want 4 things in play. If you have a multiple offer situation, it's like, well, this one's this price. They want this much in concessions. Their BAC is X. And it's like this. If you have 5 offers, you have to calculate a net. And then looking at what the BAC is, that's going to calculate the net for the seller. Let's protect the commissions. And then you're only talking, what's the highest net to the seller for price? It's the old shell game. You go in and like, hey, I want to buy this new car. And they're like, oh, hey, we can give it to you for $2,000 over MSRP. And you negotiate it all and you're about to sign the paper. And then you say, well, I want to trade my car in. And then they're like, well, you should have told me that first, because I would have given you a higher price on the new car. And then I can give you a higher price on the thing. And it's this big shell game. And I think you protect commissions, and then in true transparency, buyer and seller can negotiate the price for the home that neither realtors have any stake or equity in, but you're still getting paid what's fair market value and competitive out there. So,
hey, I just texted my team member.
Yeah.
I said, hey, is that original house in Happy Valley that we offered on for our clients still on the market? And she said, yep, laughy face. 2 months later, still out there. So now and she actually, I said, did they drop the price? She said, nope. So now they've been on the market for about 90 some days at that same price. And yeah, anyways, that's what you get when you get bad representation. Somebody's a dummy in that corner over there.
Look, if you're going to be a dummy, just don't be a dummy on your side of it. Don't say, oh my God, brand new listing in a hard to find location, blah, 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 will go fast. And then you look, days on the market, 160 days. It's like, at least go back and erase the will sell fast out of the, remarks.
Exactly. Absolutely.
It's like a weatherman. They say, hey, it's going to be 75 degrees and sunny today, but it's 60 degrees and rainy and it sucks. Well, they have the opportunity to change the forecast. Oh, yeah, it is raining. Oh, okay. 60 degrees and rain. That's what you should expect. They can change it. And we can too. So don't promote that it'll go fast with multiple offers and it's sitting there almost at its 6-month anniversary.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Joe, let's jump on to another topic. You had some other ones lined up. What do you want to talk about?
Well, there's currently a fight between members and RMLS, and there's kind of a influx of NWMLS wanting to maybe take over RMLS. And, this stems to our advocates at NAR and PMAR. Look, we lost a suit, and we pay expensive dues to those guys all the time. And it's easy for a lot of people to get pissed off and say they weren't our advocate. Look, they lost the suit. Look at all the suits they won, right? Look at where all our money went to be advocates for us. I don't think NAR did a bad job. I think they were over a barrel and they didn't have a choice. And I think RMLS is forced to react to the ruling where just as commissions are decoupled, RMLS is decoupling the listing side identified with them, and the listing side is on you. RMLS is where you post. So your listing agreement isn't part of RMLS, and they're not posting what the BAC is. They're Switzerland. We will post your listing. You negotiate that outside of us. So I think. So
that Northwest MLS is still putting BACs out there, correct? Did you say that?
Yes. So they are not participating in the suit. They are still putting out BACs. The owners are not realtors. It's member owned. They own their forms. Their lock boxes don't work for RMLS people.
Given the conversation we just had and all these advantages of this new world we're in, do you want to go back into that old world?
No. I don't want to get all new lock boxes. I don't want to deal with any of that.
If Northwest MLS has a BAC out there and it's lower than your contract with your buyer, do you feel comfortable asking for more? We generally didn't before.
They still do have buyer rep agreements. So whatever the
BAC they do. That's required. Yeah.
You can contest it. But this isn't the pill that solves all. This isn't the snake oil that solves all ailments. This is actually, we've had Kurt on here, CEO of RMLS many times. I would rather RMLS bought NWMLS, quite frankly. But RMLS is realtor owned. It's realtor forms, and they have a realtor owned aligned showings, which we get the statistics and not Zillow through showing time. And I think there's a big benefit for that. And in an upcoming podcast, we're going to have Colin Moulane. He will be the president of NAR, I think, next year. And he's always been president of this or that and high in office. Really smart guy, hell of a great guy. And we're going to have him on here and get his take of what he thinks. But look, I don't think, what's that going to solve, joining NWMLS, other than having to get all new lock boxes, pay different fees?
I don't want to go back to where there's BACs on my listings or on other people's listings. I don't want to be told what I can make with my buyers or suggested even what I should be making with my buyers. I want to make what I want to make, and I want to decide that with my buyers. And I want to have couples commissions decoupled. I want to have conversations with my sellers where I'm talking about what I'm making from them and explaining to them that in the future you can decide. You should be prepared to pay a buyer's agent, but you don't have to decide today what amount. We can decide that when that offer comes based on the dynamics of what's happening around that offer coming in. Were we on the market 40 days? Were we on the market 1 day? Are there 2 offers or are there only 1? You can decide how to address those commissions at that time. The way I explain it, I think I've said this on this podcast before. If I haven't, I should have. Seller, you don't have to decide. You don't have to bet on the game before it starts. You get to bet on the game in the 4th quarter. We don't have to decide what to pay the buyer's agent today before we're on the market and we know how the market's going to respond to your house. You just have to decide what you're paying me. Once the house is on the market and the buyer's agent asks for their commission, you will know at that time how the market is responding to your house, and you can act accordingly. I want to be really clear with our audience here. I'm not opposed. That scenario I gave of the Happy Valley experience, the reason that scenario was stupid was because it'd been on the market for 40 days at that price. Okay.
Sure.
I want to be really clear.
And, you do a CMA, it's not priced right. Even if it was day one, you could do a market analysis and realize that it's inflated.
Sure. Yeah. But if it was day one, I would have been more understanding. And I think my buyers would have been more understanding. And they would have said, okay, you just hit the market. We like your house. We want your house. Maybe there's other people there that want your house. We're going to come over asking price and we're going to, and commissions are getting cut and we'll figure it out. Right.
Sure.
But they were being completely oblivious and unreasonable based on market response to their house. And that's what's cool with this new commission structure, with them being decoupled. Sellers can see how the market responds and then act accordingly. Why would we want to go to Northwest MLS where they're in the Stone Age, in my opinion, working in a different old school mentality, stuck in the mud? I'm not interested in that. Are you, Joe?
No. And the other thing is, anytime people go cheap, it's always a regret. Anytime you go cheap, you go and you buy the cheap thing and then it breaks in a year and you got to buy another one. You could have just bought a good quality one out of the chute. You have seasoned attorneys that charge $1,000 an hour, or you have the opportunity to be represented by the court appointed attorney. Why do you have that option? Why not save yourself $1,000 an hour and go with the court appointed attorney? Well, A, because they're probably worth it, and B, you'll probably win. So it's a big difference. Yes, it might cost me $20,000 to settle court costs with this attorney. The other attorney, I saved $20,000, but I might get 10 years in prison with an aggressive sex life that I don't want. So it's like, let's pay the people that are worth the money they charge, and then the negotiations start. I just don't want, hey, we'll counter you this 10 grand less, but they have to take 10 grand less of commission. I don't want to be part of that. We don't share in the equity of the home. We don't share in the appreciation. We don't share in the loss. Our commissions should be protected. The negotiations is between buyer and sellers through the realtors that help them. And we now have something that we can do about it. And in my opinion, this is far better. Looking back, it's only been 3 months of implementation, and it's been 10 months of people worrying and stressing, and people won't need realtors anymore, and AI is going to take it over, and Zillow is going to take it over. And there's all these fears how no one's going to need a realtor. At the end of the day, someone needs a human being that knows what they're talking about, that's going to represent them and take care of them, like their doctor, their money manager, their financial planner, their attorney. That's what we are. We're not an attorney, but we do binding real estate law contracts every day. So we are basically real estate law is what we do every day. We can't call ourselves an attorney. But we also don't have to worry about crime and domestic disputes and all the things they worry about. All we do is real estate law. And if you have someone who's amazing at what they do, they're going to be worth every penny, and it's going to come back to you tenfold in price and protection and everything else.
Absolutely.
So this is going to be kind of a kick in the shins for a lot of people. I like it how you get that little smile on your face because you're like, oh, here goes Joe. This is going to be good.
I'm ready.
The people who are bitching about this are not the best realtors out there.
Absolutely.
If you look at what they do in volume, their annual income, the people bitching about it are not the people working at a high level.
They love that there's something new to bitch about. This is when when a house isn't selling, sellers want to blame the agent because they don't want to blame their price and they don't want to blame their house. Okay.
Sure.
Similarly, when an agent is struggling in the business, they want to blame their brokerage. They want to blame the market. Guess who they don't want to blame? Themselves, their talents, their work ethics. Okay. They love having something to bitch about. This is the new shiny thing that they can go, that's why I'm not doing well. So yes, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. And so look, I'm if you're going to do something, do it to the best of your abilities. That's why I created masters: professionalism, knowledge, collaboration, ethics, learning, getting smarter. It's if you're going to do something, do the best. It was Martin Luther King had a quote, and it's like, hey, look, if you're a street sweeper and that's all you are, and he made it sound like, you're a lowly street sweeper and you die and go to heaven, let them ring from the heavens above that this person is here, the best street sweeper in this city. And do it with pride and do it to the best of your ability. It's like, the other byproduct of this, we're going to talk about the market here shortly, but there's less lenders because of, let's just say 2023. So there's less lenders out there. There's less realtors because of NAR and changes, and some people just don't want to learn anything new, and it's harder to get closings for some people, and maybe they think, or their spouse thinks, you got to get a real job to make some money. I want real estate to be revered as a doctor or a lawyer and not as an appliance salesman selling refrigerators and washers and dryers and used cars and things like that. I guess I just did a big knock on used car salesmen and appliance people, but I want the level of professionalism, which is another reason why I started Masters. I want everyone to get better, substantially better. We're going to have transactions together. Wouldn't it be great for the transaction if you knew what the hell you were doing and got it holistically, not just finite parts, but get it. You get it. Hey, I got your commission demand. I got your offer. We're going to protect your commission. The sellers want to counter this, but it's in harmony with the market value of the area. Steve, you and I had a few deals together, and I've had tons of deals with all these fabulous brokers. And I got to tell you, it is a breath of fresh air when not only do you like the person on the other side, but they know their shit. And it's like, I don't have to have this conversation with them because they know it all. And it runs smooth for everybody. You have a happy seller, you have a happy buyer. There's no headaches involved or little ones that could be overcome. The other story that I was going to tell when we were talking commissions is there was a house on the market. This happened to me twice. There was two houses on the market, two different realtors, two different scenarios. We're bringing a buyer. Their BAC was substantially below what's competitive. And I submitted my commission demand, and the guy's like, no, the seller's only paying X. And I'm like, hang on a minute. And then I started talking. I was interrupted like 6 times. And I just said, hey, can I ask you a big favor? And he said, what's that? I said, 2 minutes, no talkie. Indulge me in 120 seconds, please. Let me get it out. and then you can respond everything you want, and I'll shut up. And it took me 2 minutes to explain that I had a buyer rep agreement with the buyer, and if the seller doesn't pay me, the buyer's going to pay me, which means that offer changes. And let's not fight commissions. Let them counter back in price. One guy didn't understand it. He chastised me for repeating myself 6 times, and it's because he never let me finish. The other person stopped and was quiet for 2 minutes. And he's like, well, you've been around. I know you know what you're doing. This is new to everybody. I don't know what to think about this, but we talked it through, and he sold the house, $950 or something like that. The sellers got it sold. They're doing better because it wasn't selling. So if we went in the wind, it maybe would have been another couple months of carrying costs, which would have been more than the difference right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if the buyers had to pay me, it wouldn't have been the offer that we were paying anyway. So we talked, nodded our heads, and he's like, okay, I will present it to them and I will be your advocate. And that was protected. And then they haggled on price. That is how we all should be. But unfortunately, it isn't that way. And not everybody is in it to win it in real estate. They jumped in 2012 because you put a sign in the ground, it sells, you get a whole gob of money and you don't have to do anything. I think those people are learning that if there wasn't a lot involved in being an appraiser, a marketer, a prospector, learning, knowing the law, knowing the forms, educating sort of systems of how to do it, there's a lot. We earn our money, and it isn't just putting a stick in someone's ground and walking away with 25 grand. It's more than that. And some of them have rose to the level, and some of them are like, oh, gee, I thought it was a money grab. I thought it was all for free, and it's not for me. So anyway, I had to tell those stories.
Yeah, no, great stories. And this has been a really good podcast. I want to get us through this because we're coming in towards the end of our time.
Okay.
New York style, like you like to say, Joe.
Yep.
So RMLS, Northwest MLS, we touched on it. Northwest MLS is stuck in the old and can't get out of their way in that regards. RMLS is doing a much better job of adapting, but there have been some complaints. High level, there's been some talk of overstepping. People have been getting a little bit upset about things they can and can't say in the MLS. We can no longer say specific concession amounts. Somebody tried to put "we love buyers agents" in there, and RMLS wouldn't allow that. I'm not really going to get into the weeds on that. I do know that I have had a couple frustrations with RMLS, and I hope they'll be reasonable with this. We do like to put in our listings some drone images showing nearby amenities, and RMLS is just getting really picky about what you can show nearby and what you can't. And I just hope I hope they, and they're reasonable over there, and we like Kurt, and we have a great relationship with them, and they're not perfect, but they are far better than Northwest MLS, and they're doing a great job of navigating us through this challenging time. And they are realtor owned, so they're advocates for us.
So 2 things. One, I got a question for you. But first, I'm going to say RMLS is just following the rules from the lawsuit, right? They're following the rules. We can't, do the sneaky thing where you put the commission and sneak it in there. You can't do that in RMLS. They can't have any part of it. So they're educating their members for that. But that leads to this question. Since August, you've brought buyers to, I don't know, written offers for buyers to what? Probably 15 houses. Of those 15 houses, do you give a damn what the BAC is? Do you have that conversation and say, hey, Mr. and or Mrs. listing agent, what's your BAC? Do you ask that question? Do you care?
Not anymore.
I haven't asked once. We've got a whole bunch of these courtesy to brokers things that you hang on the signpost.
No.
I didn't order any because I'm like,
no.
Who cares? It doesn't
just write
matter.
The offer. Build it in the offer. Move on. Yeah.
Every offer I've written, I don't ask what the BAC. I don't care. Matter of fact, it's probably lower than what mine is. So I just leave it to the offer.
And if you do come across a stubborn seller slash agent combination, listing agent combination, like I did in Happy Valley, make a decision. Do you love the house so much that you're willing to push through it? And if not, if there's other inventory, go move on. And that's that. That's that. It's as simple as that. And that's really not that new. There's always been some component of that. It's just different now. The commissions are in the mix on that as well.
Sure.
Did you have another story you were going to say on that, Joe?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. State of the market. Let's just chat real quick. State of the market. Okay. So since August, Fed has been easing mortgage rates. Or sorry. Very big no there. Fed has been easing the Fed funds rate. Incidentally, mortgage rates have risen since then, which has been interesting. And there's various reasons for that. Mortgage rates are more closely tied to the 10-year Treasury bill, which there's been concerns. By the way, that fridge has been open this entire podcast. At one point, I was going to ask you, I was going to tell you, Joe, at the very end of the podcast, when we were signing off, I was going to say, I have the most important question of all for you, Joe. Why is your fridge open this entire time?
It was a little warm in here,
Okay.
I thought if I left the fridge door open the whole time, I could lower it like 1 degree. I was actually, we're decorating the office for Christmas. We call it Deck the Halls. And I was putting beer and White Claw in there.
So your air conditioning your office is your fridge door. Good to know, Joe. Good to know.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, back to this. But mortgage rates are more closely tied to the 10-year Treasury bill. When inflation is bad, that tends to do bad. When there's thoughts of future inflation, that tends to do bad. The election, with right, wrong, or otherwise, there's a general belief that Donald Trump is going to create more inflation, more deficit spending. That is bad for the 10-year Treasury bill, which has impacted mortgage rates. They're not horrific. They're in the 7% range. They had gotten as low as the low sixes, I want to say July and August, right before the Fed started easing the Fed funds rate. However, even though mortgage rates have ticked up, I have to tell you guys, and if I'm alone, so be it, but I don't think I am, because I am seeing RMLS action reports supporting this somehow. We have been much busier the last few months. A lot of our listings have gotten offers. We are not in the historically the busiest time of year right now, yet we are having my second best month ever in November. Not just my best November ever, but my second best month ever. Actually, my best month ever was in April. We did 20 million that month on my team. I think we're doing about 15 million in November. I feel like this is my opinion. And by the way, I know, Joe, you and I have some common friends, good agents in the business, and there are pockets that are doing better than others. There's agents that are doing better than others. So, and I'm not in any way discrediting them or saying that I'm doing something right and they're not. Everybody has their own experience, and real estate is local. However, my experience feels like even though the mortgage rates have gone up since the Fed started easing, the word has gone out, and this, I don't think anybody can disagree with this. Word has gone out, headlines are out there that the Fed has begun easing. Okay. Now, whether that's affected mortgage rates good or bad is not necessarily what I'm discussing here. It's the word that the Fed is easing. So that perception is out there that the Fed is beginning to ease. And I feel like that has turned into some opportunities and buyer activity in the business. I also feel like post-election, there's been, quite a raging stock market. Like it or not, whatever is going on with this administration, there is a belief that it will be a more business-friendly, more friendly towards real estate in the future, and I think that has improved some sentiment out there. You and I don't get into politics a lot, Joe, and honestly, I'm a pretty middle of the road guy. I saw six one way, half dozen the other. I saw, with one person, I saw calm, less chaos, but a very strict business environment, a lot of regulation, a lot of anti-business rhetoric and activity, and then with the other, I see a lot of chaos. And this is the one we got, by the way. A lot of chaos, a lot of mean tweets, a lot of weird people in cabinet positions. But but a more business friendly, more real estate friendly environment. Less. So look, again, we're not a political podcast, but we don't get to pick the president. And one of my favorite quotes.
Theoretically, we do.
You and I don't individually get to pick the president.
Correct.
But yes,
yeah.
we do. Yes. But we pick how we respond and how we handle our lives. One of my favorite memes of the last election cycle was, it said, what happens in your house is far more important to you than what happens in the White House. In other words, what we do in our world, how we conduct our business, how we carry ourselves is going to impact us financially far more than whoever's sitting in Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. So, however, I guess just to wrap up, it feels to me like the state of the market is moving in the right direction. There feels to me like there is a tailwind, definitely not the headwinds we had a year ago. If you remember last quarter of 2023, it was just god awful when mortgage rates were 8% and everything felt like it was coming to a dead standstill in as far as activity. And I'm generally excited about 2025, and I'm generally excited not only about spring and summer, but even January and February. I feel like there's going to be a tide coming into our business. So I'm pretty hopeful. Again, there will be some fits and starts, and I'm not saying it's all perfect, but
I agree with the sentiments. I think it's been overall a great year. I even bought a house this year myself, and
congratulations again.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to caution people.
4-car garage, very impressive.
4-car garage, yeah.
For a 1969, was it 1969 house?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, something like that.
60s, yeah. For that era to have 4-car garage, one level in Westland on a big lot. I mean, it's what a cool place.
Yeah.
That wasn't common back then.
But anyway, I want to caution people. We get a lot of statistics force-fed to us, and they just say, hey, our listing inventory is higher than it's been, but it's lower than last month. Pendings are up. If you look at high, low, average, median, it doesn't give you the full truth. It gives you a snapshot of one way to look at it, but look at the average number of units per realtor. It's 1.75 units. It's not even 2 units per realtor. But you have realtors like you that do, 150, 200 units a year, and you have 150, 200 brokers that do 0 a year. It just happens to be the average of 1.75. So how this translates to business, if you have a good looking house and it's newer and good shape and you price it correctly in a high demand subdivision, you're still going to get multiple offers. It's a great market. You also have to look at what's struggling right now is condos and townhomes. The Pearl has lots of inventory. Nothing's moving. Some of the buildings are in trouble, and the HOAs are hellacious. The monthly HOA, maybe special assessments. Forest Heights is having trouble. So if you tell me what it is that you're trying to sell in the area, it's not going to be the average of 56 days on the market. I might say 120 days. I might say 5 days. It just kind of depends. So take everything, in stride when you look at these statistics, because averages is just a blanket effect of everything. And you really got to drill down and know that market. But it is an amazing market for so many people. And
yeah,
even in those areas, just price it accordingly, and it'll still be a good market.
Absolutely. Okay. Hey, let's wrap up. Great podcast, Joe. I really enjoyed this. I think we covered some awesome topics, and I think there's a lot of value that we gave for our listeners. So thank you. And we will be back very, very soon, everyone.
All right. See ya. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Portland Real Estate Podcast, Oregon and Washington's #1 show for cutting-edge real estate discussions. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to the members of Masters in Real Estate, a private and exclusive Facebook group and the #1 source for all real estate topics. Thanks for being there, gang. I love you. Finally, I want to thank our faithful listeners. Without an audience, we're just two guys talking to each other. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so the new episodes automatically come to you. Make it great.